Look, one of two things can happen. Either he becomes the school shooter, which I don't want either, because the more isolated we get, the more likely I think we are to everybody's highlight reel. So we just make the assumption that everybody's life is like this, and my life is crap. So what's going on with me? These school shootings are coming from somewhere, and I think it's coming from... What's going on, guys? Courtney Mirage here, back again from XtreMerps.com. And I think the last two episodes, I don't think I went into enough detail about why I'm doing what I'm doing. And honestly, I said that I'm trying to bring the world together again, and that's quite a big feat, if I do say so myself. I can understand. I'm not Gandhi. I know. I'm not Jesus. All right, I get it. But I'm just a guy who's observing some things. And the things that I'm observing are that over time, I feel like as a society, we've been getting more and more isolated, more and more into our own heads about stuff, and we're choosing camps, and we're not trying to listen to other people. And I think that the more we can open our minds to other people's perspectives, the better off that we're going to be. So why is this important? So I think it's important because I'm noticing an increased level of anxiety that's happening everywhere. You can see it in the way we interact with each other. You can see it in school shootings, right? That's anxiety to the roof, right? I mean, like, I just had a son, so I'm already worried about when he's going to start going to school and what's going to happen to him. Look, one of two things can happen. Either he becomes the school shooter, which I don't want either, or something terrible can happen with him at school, and I'm a worried parent already, and he's not even in kindergarten yet, or pre-K. He's not even talking yet. What am I talking about? But those things worry me. And not only just as a parent, but looking at how we're interacting with each other, these school shootings are coming from somewhere. And I think it's coming from the fact that we've become so disconnected, having an inability to talk to each other, listen to each other, and just be open to other perspectives. If I were to dig into the mind of a school shooter, I would think that they want a few things. They want revenge because maybe they weren't heard or something. Maybe they tried saying something to somebody. Maybe somebody did something to them and they didn't have the proper tools to communicate. And instead of communicating with their words, they communicate with the blicky. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the right way to go about it. So it could either be that. Maybe they want attention. Maybe they didn't get the attention they needed as a kid. Maybe when they became adolescents, they changed because they started going through puberty and they were giving their parents some problems and they got rejected, or they weren't heard at the home, or they got bullied and they needed the proper attention to be able to connect and forge relationships with people, and they weren't able to do that properly. So instead of working at it and trying to make more connections and make friendships at school, they started just getting more isolated. And then they just said, all right, I've had enough. Y'all about to get the strap. Look, this isn't easy for me to talk about, okay? And I'm no expert on it. And it does make me emotional because I'm thinking about my son and I'm thinking about the kinds of things that can happen to him, or if he might end up having the psyche himself. And I don't want to raise somebody who could do those kinds of things either. So I'm looking out for everybody. And it's a really difficult conversation, but I think that the framework that we've been setting up in our society with increased isolation, increased just teams and not listening, I think that these things are creating echo chambers and making people less likely to be open and more likely to respond with a negative response instead of responding with empathy. Why else is this important? Isolation is something I think we can all relate to. I know that I've felt isolated at a lot of points in my life, especially in certain moments where I was struggling with either finding work or being happy at work, or being able to connect with people that I once loved, or even struggling to find new connections in places that I was living. So I went to LA for acting school, and I knew nobody over there except a couple people. And I didn't really hang out with them very much. I was trying to make new friends. But at first, since I didn't know anybody, I felt an extreme sense of isolation. I got thrown into this random 1-bedroom apartment right next to the acting school. I had no car. I had a skateboard. That was my way of getting around places. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't know where anything was. All I had was a skateboard and a dream. Your boy was just trying to make it out there. I felt extremely isolated because I didn't have any friends there. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And eventually I started making friends, and my classmates in acting school became the best of friends. And it was great because I decided, you know what, I'm not going to isolate myself. I'm going to open myself up, make new friends, try to expand my community and learn more about other people, instead of just being to myself and choosing the easy route of saying, you know what, I'm not even going to bother. And it ended up working out. I felt a lot more fulfilled. I was a lot more motivated to get up in the morning to go to acting school, instead of curling up into my bubble and thinking, you know what, I'm just going to stay here on my blue raggedy futon and just watch Netflix. Was Netflix even a thing back then? Isolation, I think, is becoming more prevalent in this day and age. Social media is making people more isolated. What everybody's seeing on Instagram, Facebook, is everybody's highlight reel. I'm sure you've heard that term before. Everybody posts the best things going on in their life on social media. So from your standpoint, you're looking at everybody's highlight reel, the best things going on, the big wedding that just happened, the new house that they bought, the new child that was born, the Jamaica trip that they took with them walking on the beach in the sand with their new husband or their new partner or something. And we see it aggregated. So we see everybody's highlight reel. So we just make the assumption that everybody's life is like this and my life is crap. So what's going on with me? What's going on with my life that I'm not able to get these things? And I think that just makes us more isolated, because instead of connecting on the actual level of, okay, hey, let's talk about what's going on in our lives, we see somebody else's life looking perfect and our life looking like like Jesus Christ. The reason I think that isolation is extremely important in terms of society is because the more isolated we get, the more likely I think we are to act out or react in a negative way. So as I mentioned earlier, school shootings, I think, is a result of that. Anxiety and isolation. Comment sections on YouTube and Reels and stuff. People are just angry, I think. People aren't happy. Right? We have all this stuff. Right? We have all these things that we can buy. We can go to Amazon. We can get something immediately. If we don't like somebody, we can block them on social media. If we don't want to see somebody, we can click on them on the phone. And all of these instant gratifications, all of these immediate responses to things I think all of these things are making us less able to handle conflict and handle different perspectives. And that leads me to my next thing, which is increased likelihood of conflict and inability to resolve it. Since we've become so accustomed to getting things our way, we have an inability to see other perspectives and see other sides of things. I think an important element of being able to forge different connections and connect with people on a deeper level is the ability to understand different perspectives and contexts that are separate from your own. So for example, I was looking up this concept called Sonder. I think the term was coined by this guy called John Koenig or something like that. He created the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And Sonder is the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, and inherited craziness. The rest of the definition doesn't matter too much. It's mainly that first bit. But pretty much everybody's got a story. Everyone's got their own context, their own perspectives going on. And just because you have all the context to your perspective doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have the context to their own perspective. And those might clash at some point. And I'm really interested in really understanding that clash and how to forge a relationship and more understanding despite that clash. I think where we're headed with increases in technology, increases in ability to just get instant gratification in anything we want, anytime, and also the perspective of just shutting people out if we don't like what they have to say. I think all of these things are making us less likely to open ourselves up to new perspectives, because ultimately I think that's what's going to get us closer to what we want as a society, which is peace. Pretty much to wrap it up, the reason I'm doing what I'm doing here, I'm trying to just get people to open up their minds to new thoughts and perspectives and forge connections despite having differences. I know nobody likes to hear that. Nobody's trying to hear that. But that's the way we got to go. I'm convinced of it. So yeah, aside from all that stuff, I want to share some updates with you on Xtre Merps. So I made a few updates. So the first big update that I made is, I decided that I'm going to make a weekly character rotation, similar to League of Legends, if anybody has played that. And pretty much if you don't know what that is, it's pretty much allowing everybody to be able to play all characters, but they're going to be changed out every week. So there's going to be 2 characters that are available. So for example, Bigfoot's going to be available. Gold Digger is not. Leech is not. But Black Belt is. Speaking of, Black Belt's the new character that I made, so he's in there now. And every week, there's going to be 2 different characters that are available. So next week, it might be Gold Digger and Leech, or it might be Leech and Black Belt, for instance. So the reason I did this was because I was hearing a lot of pushback on the increased payment structure that I've been coming up with. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to have everybody have a good time. I don't want anybody to feel left out or not have an ability to play the game the way they want and try out the new characters. So if you want, you can become an Xtre Merp. And by becoming an Xtre Merp, all of these characters become immediately available to you at any point. So you don't get restricted to the weekly rotation. So for instance, on this account here, I'm an Xtre Merp. So Xtre Merps can start the game with any of these characters. So that's the first update. So second update is pretty much the Merp to Xtre Merp membership. So instead of buying characters individually, you can become an Xtre Merp. And becoming an Xtre Merp for $4.99 allows you to no longer be restricted to the weekly character rotation, and you'll have access to all current and future characters at all times. Another update that I made, the daily challenge is no longer once per day. So you can do this daily challenge at any point. Normally, when you hit the daily challenge once, this button goes gray and you can't play it again. But now you can do the daily challenge as much as you want. So I can start it with Bigfoot if I wanted to and play again. And the reason I did this was because people were telling me that they wanted to play the daily challenge over and over. And I don't want to restrict people's ability to play the game. So there you go. It's going to be the same daily until the next daily challenge, like the next day. But you can use it as a practice sesh to sort of practice up on other abilities and whatnot. So I left that to you guys. So I was looking through a few of my older videos, and I noticed one of my more popular ones was my D&D video talking about Rangers and how they're top tier. That's my perspective. They are not ass, and I still stand by it. But I wanted to follow up because it seems like the D&D content is something that people are curious about. I was thinking a lot about how I make a D&D character, and I go through a 5-step process when making a D&D character. I don't remember where I got this process from, but this is kind of how I do it now. When you're picking a class, you're looking at the different classes, so you can pick a fighter, a rogue, a ranger, a wizard, and then you can pick a race, usually in the opposite order. Well, it doesn't matter, but you pick a race, so you can pick a half-orc, an elf, a human. Nobody picks human, even though variant human does have the ability to select a feat instead of selecting a ability score. That's pretty broken in my opinion, depending on how you use it. But anyway, so you can pick a race, you can pick a class, and then you pick a background, and all of those things combine to make your character. But what ends up getting left out is, who is the character? Ultimately, on a deeper level, who is the character? You can't just create a shell of a person. You can't just create a half-orc fighting acolyte who has no backstory. You got to create a backstory. So the way I create a backstory is, first I give them a persona. So I have a character who, the persona I gave him, he's a college freshman and he thinks he's him, and he's definitely not. He's sheltered by his rich parents. They started a business to strike a deal with a noble genie to maintain some power. And apparently he's supposed to take over the business. That's his whole persona. So that's like him in a nutshell. That's his whole deal. But then there's other aspects that I go through with this character as well. The second thing that I add to a character is agency. And agency is pretty much, well, how do they interact with the world such that they get what they want? And everybody's got that thing that they do that they know kind of works. So my character, he uses his charm to get what he wants. Full disclosure, he's an enchantment wizard. So he's all about the charm. He's all about the riz. He's a rizzard. Bars. I can't take credit for that one. He can slap him with the spell charm person and get what he wants. He can walk up to someone, use gift of gab to make them forget what he said, and then he can sort of spin his words again so that way he sounds like the most eloquent person on the planet. The more I explain this guy, the more he sounds like a psychopath and a gaslighter. So my character uses charm to get what he wants. Other characters, maybe a fighter, might use his strength or her strength to get what they want. They might use their ability to intimidate to get what they want. So there's different ways of using agency. The third piece that I add to a character is goal or motive. What are they trying to do in life? Like, what's the big end game? What's their end game? My character's goal is to break free from his family business and have his own life. Ultimately, he's gonna use his agency and his persona to sort of accomplish that. That's how he's gonna go about his day-to-day to try and accomplish his end goal. Having an end goal, I think, is useful for a character because it sort of gives you things to think about while you're rolling your dice and making your decisions, either in combat or social encounters. And I think that that's pretty useful. Otherwise, I think it either becomes bland or random, and you start doing random things and you don't really know, there's no full cohesion to what your character's doing. And I think that it ultimately makes it more fun when you can do that. The fourth piece that I add to a character is wants and fears. So what do they want? Not like their goals and motives, but rather what do they like and what do they fear? So the fears are super important because those are going to be one of two things that really get in their way of accomplishing what they want. So my character's fear is that he's actually not that charming, ironically. He actually learned his charm through learning spells from some lady, and he doesn't have any charm of his own. So when he doesn't have his spells, he's kind of a loser. So he learned how to charm, and he has that to sort of get what he wants through his agency. But his ultimate fear is that once that charm goes away, what's he going to do? Because he doesn't actually have any inherent charm. He learned it all through spells. The fifth and final piece that I add to a character is connections and conflicts. So these connections are the close ties that a character has with their loved ones. So for example, my character, his close ties are the lady that gave him all the spells and his father, who ended up paying for everything with the family business. So the conflicts that he has are with both of those people. So what the lady that gave him all the spells holds over his head is that she pretty much taught him everything. He doesn't really know anything on his own. So she can at will decide, you know what, I don't want to give you any power anymore. And he has that fear and that conflict driving that relationship and connection with that person. It creates a more colorful and dynamic experience when you're interacting with NPCs in a campaign or interacting with other PCs and characters and making your decisions. And the other conflict that he has with his dad is that his dad paid for everything. So he doesn't want to go to his dad because his ultimate motive is that he wants to break free from the family business. He's not trying to do any of that. So he can't go to his dad because his dad's going to tell him, yeah, I pay for everything. What do you have? You can't do anything. Or his dad might say, I'll give you anything that you want, but in exchange, you're going to have to continue working for the family business. And my character knows that's exactly what he doesn't want to do. So there's the conflict there with his father. There's the conflict that he has with that lady that taught him all the spells. And yeah, so those are some pretty interesting things that I think are useful for creating characters. So just to recap that, when creating a D&D character, persona, agency, motive, fears, and connections and conflicts, that's the sweet spot. That's That's the nectar of the gods when it comes to creating a character. And I've applied this to multiple characters, and I've gotten so much enjoyment out of Dungeons and Dragons as a result. You know, you can just like roll the dice and hack and slash and be a murder hobo. You can do all that. And like that's fun. I like to do that as much as the next guy. But if you want to get like real deep into like Dungeons and Dragons, you got to start creating some dynamic characters. And I think that this is a good start. Anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. If you got some value out of this, feel free to smash that like button, hit subscribe, hit that notification bell if you want to get more. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.